The twilight toilet of the gods' guts. Via Corrosibile and us on Shanks and Egg, on our way past fence posts, a horse in the apple tree gobbling at the green fruits, midges performing their dances in tall columns, smoked curlicues from Mania chimney, ovine clouds etched in gold, beneath which crows were crying Vapare. Is there something wrong with the sun? Don't you have the impression the reins steering the phaeton are in unschooled hands? We'll have to take his driver's license away. Good day, Peter Meadow. You greetin' that hound? He asked anxiously, since said dog, big as a mastiff, bumped us with his head by a way. Hello. Nah, the point of the compass. At the moment, we're wandering on the southwards. Apropos walking sticks, we need to demand my sword cane back. Lovely roof slates. Agwan, he was once taken ill, and still recalls his little sausage pension, which in the meantime I slipped him. Oh yes, deep coffee brown with a twist of violet. Got a nice shape to him, too. Hip-roofed. The routine war monument of excessively unhewn stones. Just like you find 'em when plowing, reluctant donation, artlessly joined with poor mortar. A car full of troopers passing us at our expense. A sign on the power pylon. USA supplies for sale. Whirly day tents, used. Blue jeans, laced boots, all alike. Such a hum and a fragrance, so that even Paul instantly cried, "Splendid trees!" Bluegens, Petrarch, also made a constant complaint of his shoeworks being too tight. All the grandees of blue blood, of the sangre azul. You ought to see the local Junkerian crowd sometime. The old trial linden, a patrimonial court. Say, patrimonium, however, means male private parts. So what? The itch of prime noctis? Old farmers sometimes secretly douse it with rum. Tossing a stone into its leafy crown is considered a transgression. Quite common in those Middle Ages, probably as a sort of inevitable reciprocity, was the term curcubation, or curcubitation, for when a cotter impregnated milady, his liege dame, leaving her with a pumpkin. Don't step in the cow pie. Should someone peer into a knothole, his right arm will be bound behind his back and his privy parts nailed to its trunk. In his left he is given a potato peeler to take care of business. Formidable regulations, said Paul, shuddering. Intentionally, certainly not, he replied, somewhat testily. Upon sighting a pair of plump calves, however, he went on in honor. Zounds, how those doughty damsels can stride! Much have I heard of the loyalty and beauty of the indigenous breed of humans. To be sure, her skirt is wrinkly, but behold those rear cheeks. Now that's a resolute wench. Cut-throat piglets with her bare hands, throttles every sturdy cock, opits, and gazed at me for consent. Yes, Vickers and Armstrong. One of the more slanderous regional sagas says that they boil their spuds in the same water they've just used to wash their hands or other body parts. They never wash nothing nohow. I had no idea that you've recently come to steam such muzzled hulks. A risky race that scarcely improves upon closer inspection. Half man, half cayman, and a tractor is the third half. And the less you say about their faces, the better off you are. Historically quite explicable, crossbred between footsore migrating barbarians and Slavs who dribbled in, backbred with convicts, since the local father figures used the heath as their parramatta for good while. No, Paul. Seldom does the eye encounter respectable specimens, and they too look as if cut by an inept hand out of a cheap folk costume illustration. Sets pickets in his fence, carves his flails, halves his axes. I'll add a quote from Hagedorn for you. The natural ferocity of their countenance, the mouth extended nearly from ear to ear, the lips were thin, and seemed, like other portions of their frame, devoid of natural pliancy, so that ruling expression never varied under the influence of any emotion whatever. The teeth were exceedingly long and protruding. Pym. All the women have, sad to say, diluted facial expressions, Paul replied with a pout. Big mouths under little eyes, yet who, what aesthete, asks about that when confronted by so jaunty a grass widow? Amiable dreamer, I'll wait with you at a curtsy. Muted. Upon the meadow in the background 2 cows were conversing. One seedman called to another. And then here came Tummy, Dick and Harry again, Flesian and Pomona, and a savage, moody Jack of all trades. Or he was something else. After all, there's a Swiss jackknife too. Fingers like cramps. The horizon's creatures. Much to my honor, I've since learned that Freud always walked about in a Lawton cloak. Battle filed after, come to mind, while he, unbidden, post-dicked the weather for her. That sort of rain is never amiss. They greeted in jovial tones, so near that even Paul. Sure, Kafka, as tourist and paysagist, gushes about the general impression of the farmers, noblemen who have found salvation in agriculture, where they have arranged their labor so wisely and humbly that it fits seamlessly into the whole, until their blessed death, real citizens of the earth. Now what a ninny that guy was, just as two gay tourists swished past, one on one tandem bike. Paul, indeed resemble each other like a mob of Bashkirians. You're hinting that, with the flushing of game at all, some are frequently half or somewhat more slain. How appealing. How many more inhabitants does your Odingen here have? Put most pictographically. Petite Côte is a small place. There are no more than 5 or 6 houses, these of wood. There are about 100 inhabitants, mostly Creoles. Quote from Rodman. Paul. We have but one single Schmidt in town. He at once thrust out his lower lip. That'd mean, maybe, less than 200 souls? Speak not to me of souls. While a little window waltzed screeching in its oily thirst hinges, and my nympho, clean and lady, waved our way with a filthy mop. Coot coot, the terror of vehicles, yoke of land, under the dominion of Muscow, yields 18 bushels of sowing corn, for in fact a plough was tugging a geyser of soil to and fro behind it. All this, a chunk of cement. With industrious hands he took a moment of thought, of time, and an edem of space, drawing them out with thorough. Dan says, If you could perhaps think in a more measured fashion, Paul. Otherwise you'd best go yonder, and adventure a game of dominoes with her. Ho! Not uninterested. What's the price around here, actually? If I understand you falsely, you mean, for tidying up the house? Once again, there were those 2 familiar possibilities. Either 3 marks an hour. His mouth released a pfft, or, however, 2 marks, or fucked royally, shruggings. So I'll give her 3. Oh mon Dieu. Me, a cultural he-man, wrote Paul. Barbarous hic ego sum, from Ovid. The local alderman doesn't so much as know I exist, and for me that's such a savings of labor and social obligations. Yes, howdy ho. Those are butter boxes, the pretty tiny wooden trestles that the dairy truck takes along every morning, and so forth, although layabouts, like us at present, actually should tip their hat to every milkman. 'Cause a teenage bullhead came led, running from after school keeping a lovely lad, where government and citizens are like cattle, for the farmers all burst on their way to milk. The cowlets, with gentle grumpling, and lukewarmy petroly breeze, since apparently they made a principle of honking their noses to the rear. Am I too polite, because county cell always reminds me of continents? To Mr. Jacobi, however, belongs the honor of having traversed this singularly wild region in many directions, and the most interesting particulars of the narrative now published have reference to his adventures and discoveries therein. Thus, it is not without good reason that we claim public attention for the extraordinary narrative which ensues. From Rodman. In that patch of woods yonder there's a bomb crater from the Great Old War. Let's leave it unvisited, Paul decided, and yawning. Damn, I'm tired all of a sudden. And I still gotta work the shift tonight. Worried. That's generally the cause in the month of Yoni. Last Yoni, and subconsciously thrust a hand into that pocket. Right. There'd been no mistake about the crinkling, but probably just another wish list. Evidently a lady who chose to remain unnamed, unknown, and he knew her. I briefly pictured her in her martyr's cell. But best keep my disdains. Gonna cost some real money. Stay here, stay with you, always with you. Help, a poor thing, but mine own, and as rare as moonlight. Paul had, with rather feeble attention, followed my gesticulux, and nodded glumly now. The years have had a strange way with them, my beloved utopist. In the end, they're all fat and dragonish, and you'd sell 'em for a pipe full of fine-cut shag. I wandered through woody copse, surrounded by a desert vast. The trunks all stood erect to the tops, whose needles smoothed the path now by yellow pale light of eve, and no imprint of foot did leave, when at my shoulder came a grope, and handed me an envelope. Unsealing it, I looked inside. It was the warrant of my death by suicide. I had, in such and such a town, in such and such a year, yes, did, at least. The years have a strange way with them, my beloved utopist. In the end, they're all fat and dragonish, and you'd sell 'em for a pipe full of fine-cut shag. At the cue, Paul instantly lit himself one. Ah, this fizz colt down to the smallest toad. The to-do they make with just a bit of gummy nastic body that Krista, by the by, started wanking at the age of 5.5. Believe me, there's not a one of them that wouldn't prefer her new dress to any Rembrandt. Recently, we were visiting an acquaintance, and comes his good 2-year-old daughter, sits in an armchair beside me, points with a tiny pale finger, like a pencil stump, you know, at Franziska's mini duds, and says just one word: chic. What sort of huge furrow's that? It's half a ravine. Maidenvale sorrows. I first had to meditate on that for a couple of years before I figured out the meaning. The farmers are too just dense. At best, they would have tried to make me believe that this was the vale where maidens experienced their first sweet pain, ergo the deflowering spot for the old district of Beden's Bostel, or whatever. Nope, you gotta pronounce it in Plattdeutsch. Middenful, midden, dump to be filled, plus sour, an outlet for the local aquifer. 'Twould appear after a long period of rain the woods were like sponges, and it's still trickling in good, while yet today. Chief prairie land, deeply cut by gorges or ravines, which in the middle of summer are dry, but the form of channels muddy and impetuous torrents during the season of rain. A creek, homonymous with the beloved Krieg, obvious at first glance. I would recognize her zero again, too, if I met in the midst of Salisbury Plain at night, he added, chapfallen. Tsk, what riffraff! Just be happy you live all alone. For, as if ordered up, there came a boom from the hemlock woods roadside. A couple of measures of music, soulless, as if from the moon, or some other sassy flat heavenly body, and then two down and dirty matching voices sang, Fara sobo ro, fara bo ra, sa ba rabo rare ro, sa ra 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 ba ro ro ro, ra da ra sa ra po do no flo ro, and always with accompaniment, as if somebody was rubbing a pumice stone on lava. Covered with a dense undergrowth of sweat-myrtled forms, an almost impenetrable coppice, burthening the airs with its fragrance. From Goldbeggar. No scapin' Portugals, Paul said in a matter-of-fact tone. And here, where the corn cockles stood low, we got our share of a view of a fine kettle of fish, Sagamla zofria. Like the hermit in Freischütz, he lazily tested a bit of ear schmaltz, but decided instead to indulge in a crude booger. Beside him, the fencing bag, Capsula persa pastoris, on his shoulder strap, unmistakably cut off from under a stranger's sofa, the mighty white blue and Maldalian, its inscription sure to be, I am state enemy number 1, or hear the words of the first chairman of the gay club, or similar juvenilia, that's how they were. In his right, the devil's walking working stick, the other he laid, now and then, round her breast. Blasé milking machine, play the devil in the bull along, obviously meant to awake our scorn and envy. The unbarbered outsider, they imagine a great work of art hangs as a slightly sweet fruit on the hippie tree. Let's hope they do a nice job of crushing your maverick face sometime, my friend. He reluctantly turned the cacophonous gizmo off. Visible to the eye for the first time, white, and as tiny as 2 matchboxes. Satanic inventions. The cosmos is indeed growing curiouser and curiouser, and at the speed of a flat race. His hiking compagnonette, significantly unkempt, her sackcloth blouse ripped for tits, the skirt, however, a somewhat more modest weave, the color queen, the queen of France's pussy's color, the calf-strong legs hiked not unsluttishly up high, so that somebody, he had bent low enough, could surely have guessed her oaths. Never to clip the pubic hairs, never to wash the box, to pass any schnapps under 100 proof on to the novices. Fully bared, however, honor to whom is due, but was one. This Diogenes imitation, course it could be rather t'other way round that Dan was simply a hippie of antiquity, nothing more, who dozed in a barrel, X'd out in the open forum, vexed the citizens with beetle firesies. Sure, were someone to meet him nowadays, he'd look just as greasy and dumb and sassy, hollow-legged and work-shy, repulsive folk. Apparently, Coscoletto la Lazzarone. Her, especially, unscribed right hand on the verge of summer and sloppy do-it-yourself job, all the same, concurrently began to check us out with sly glances. The stork on high made a disgusted detour round these vagrant minstrels. If you be not pleased, put your hand in your picket, and please yourself. Fell eyes. Downright flamboyant, and by way of catching his attention, gave his head a whack with his own knapsack, unquelled. Telling you that's him. Likewise held up her little head with one hand, for more comfortable viewing. For Paul, himself a sorry sight to see, could likewise not take his eyes off of her. A Pisgah prospect yield, a penis for your thoughts, Paul. Hey, your concupiscence is written on your brow in Suderlunan script. What would Sigmund Grozny say about that? Paul paid me no attention. Damn, that's gotta be. But Paul couldn't get much further than that, for while the female there rolled over halfway on one side, and bare-assed, all sure mock and pseudo, which granted, open a view onto her monstrous vulva, 0. A lady bright, can it be ride, this window open, from sleeper. The male had already got to his feet, was arranging his clothes, to the extent permitted, and had in fact rehung his shoulder portmanteau, and began, politely, a la Campagna, to stride toward us. P at once modestly. Say, if he's coming over to see anybody, then it's you. Retreated, stood then, 6 foot behind me, hand to chin, and held vigil and shook his head the whole time. He casually thrust one arm into his sack, and the demi-fellowed actually pulled out one of my products, the big yellow-black tome. Not so spared that either. Her furzy down, while the witch's broom, actually burning with curiosity, peered through the binocs, also called filed glasses. Actually, something sterner and old-fashioned, Prussian woulda. So much for cheerful youth. The world bestows an earnest look. It asks, what have you done, and where is your book? You must get down to work, and move the task ahead, for if those years you shirk, a useless life you've led. You wish an autograph, do you? Take this, in recompense. It occurred to me to say, along with the false 5-mark piece that I presented him, also, the little lady was rolling now in such a simrocky motion. Purchase, if at all possible, for your lovely Miss Badminton's there, before joining forces to invade the village of self-righteousness, a bar of curd soap. As for changing one's shirt every quarter moon, we do better to leave that to whatever local branch of the royal antediluvian ordure of buffaloes. The island of Iron Hail. I'll ask her right now, Paul replied obligingly, since he saw that I was commencing some ball-pointing. Date and signature. Beast thanks, and the lady will unmutedly take a nice long bath. I am more amazed that my status allows me, he added, a resigned man. Thanks. As an author, you gotta have a few flowery phrases on hand. Didn't Albrecht Schaefer always spell Hade with an AI? Tant piss, Paul delivered from the rear. Thanks. What do you write? Paul, curious, still hanging via long glances on both. They now, in concert, clapped it open. The eternal now, he said for Paul to hear. Fine. Spared yet another pint of air, and as Dolly repeated it first tensely, then broodingly, then thoughtfully, and her pronunciation wasn't that bad. Mandelight's not me, nor woman, neither, Paul. Breeding Edam experts in stud farms might be worth a try. While he, staring at the paper, began to sort it out. The eternal? Or to the turn all now? Outstanding. For us, time travelers, it is constantly now, the present, the only eternity. Yet another justification for our mode of life. Well, 'twas to be expected, he calmly added, but the little lady relieved. For ever, plus French, new, naked. To the eternally nude. Oh, thank you so much, and began tossing me a generous load of kissy hands. Let's move on, Paul. I would say, let us go round the back way to Scortelben, through the hood, men of the crowd. The town's fishermen's milieu. There were sort of ghettos for certain professions. Well, see, more'n enough of those peasants and mangler grubbers today yet. Layburgers, Offenbach. You're at home now, Paul said with satisfaction. Also, a place where old, isolated Nazis ought to reside in 500 years, the folklorists would be puzzled why every settlement has its Braunau. Say, by the by, your slug money is brilliantly done. How do you come by it? Give me some. But not too much. Or the publishers, Tucker, Zollner, Ziesner. An acquaintance, William Gautry, worked only in February, could always explain it away as carnival prank. In about half an hour, the large amount is seen to be counterfeit presentment from Diddling Considered, sending forth to the winds an appalling voice, half shriek, half roar, from Maelstrom. And be careful where you hand it out. Best thing to do is give kids and codgers a twilight delight. The first, burnished red, tile roof, the broad-legged circumstridings of what was not even in the good competition material, a Trago marshal who believes in good and bad weather, enormous voices and ox-browed countenances. Whatever Levator might have seen 'em, I see not but an ignorant in honesty. Paul, of course, had to walk over there in lazy urbane style and have a look-see at what was on the sign there at the entrance, and came back at once, nose clamped between fingers. Dude of Mr. Germany, he nasaled, squatting there, missing Linkley in the farmyard, his ass directed gatewards, and shits, judging by the smell, rodder in persona, a mirren on them. He that tilleth his land shall increase his heap. Sirach 20:28. Franzchen would remark. Yes, yes, trying to get farmers to learn reading and writing is pure cultural goody-goodism. Those who are always complaining that humanity is all too refined, overbred, or even cultivated should spend their next vacation in the country. Perhaps then they'll notice that 90% of humanity is out and out obtuse, and another 9% pretty much unenlightened. What's written there, by the way? Fresh eggs? Sandals made of skin, rosaries of teeth. A workin' woman, little limp ears, one-eyed, a bit tipsy, bellowed bisyllabics in his wake. He, however, just puckered his arse. Awful family. Wouldn't mind having a pair myself, fresh eggs. And onward, alongside the village that still stinks here, piglets a-playing. Sometimes they'll bite their balls off, leaving the stall swimming in blood. Would God that these country bumpkins do the same, Paul declared, still unreconciled. May your assertion that the local population is on the annual decrease be well-founded. Oh yes, it's enough to upset a man, these umpteen thousand easygoing passers-on of a goofy face, although... Be honest, Paul. If it had been a lady, a sort of hale and hearty troll, in the best loin ears, all milk and blood and bottom. He was honest enough to hesitate. Oh Lord, a real nice elastic peasant girl, spry and not a little filthy, an assiduous demi-clever barefoot lass. He was on the verge of a thrusting, unbiased lower lip. Silesian barbs, spoken with an English R. When catching sight of the raw-boned virago, evidently him gave second thoughts. Long-necked shanks, an apron sewn from tent canvas, still in the Second World War, barbarically covering her foot in mouse disease. On her back a pannier, at her chest lumber tied up with string. Above her saurian skull holes a broad swathe of mouldy hair. The Sioux, indeed, appear to have been Mr. Rodman's bugbears par excellence, and he dwells upon them and their exploits with peculiar emphasis. The narrative embodies a detailed account of the tribe consisting of about 500 warriors. Since Paul, he just couldn't help ogling even this maire d'oie who'd Palista trainee and kept mentally caressing her rear end. Me coldly eyed it, after all, a question of his Tholsed salvation. The sturdy Granger corresponds to the highest Latinalgic deformation of what the Christian Carnile terms the human image, and can therefore never assume a passable body. He is either black, unclean, stinking, dreadful, or at the least obscurating, while of an ugly, oogly countenance, with a hooked beak-like, or also flattened nose, concealed fumy eyes, short, hard, claw-laden hands and feet, the legs and fingers here sight. Quote from Rodman. In person, the Sioux generally are ugly, ill-made race, their limbs being too much small for the trunk, according to our ideas of the human form. Their cheekbones are high, and their eyes protruding and dull. End quote. Often one or the other of which is lame. The entire lure in sex and stature is never well formed in proportion, but rather always of some irregular fashion, betraying an inner deficit of beauty. Freeholders, tight-lipped and pitch-nosed of visage, stink-glanded and air-gunned of rectum, and he may his hacienda ever be so large, the limp-eared head is best suited for weight-bearing. Right then, by way of the illustration, a puffy frog-cheeked farm-hand pissed, out of rage, into the cistern of his bread-giver. The fattest farmer has, of course, the loveliest sunsets behind his house. "Si piscia contro il vento, si bagna la camicia," Paul murmled. Which is why no proper speech emerges from these shadowy figures, but rather only something human-like blasted in the air, as if in imitation of billowing upon a piccolo-fuccolo, or, like a hollow stone echoing such a voice, hissing lithping, befuddled, dark, weak, and scrawny in its tone, as if from a defunct barrel or potsherd. But the little brooks scold so sleepy-headed through the extraordinary landscape, squeakishly milled, great plagues of forget-me-not, campionated. The pre-military bellowing barking, this freedom's breath, blows fiercely through the world. Undershot Milleret's songs, freedom and lockstep, to be equated with the mutterly Goodrich, fight for peace. Two ham lets us, divided by a gushing rill, accompanied by biches of a moist strange odor. He that presumably took for a dainty acoustic subterfuge, for he was too fully occupied with casting several chamois glances across to a bumptious myrmidonna. Only after the third, fourth, try did he realize that 'twas not in vain that she was standing like a roche de bruns. "Seest thou Viator," to wit the volunteer fire company, and their smartest, dark blue wannabe manhoods, and the non-local, definitely maidens stared along the full length of those couple of hoses. Then they threw themselves in sextet onto the pump and worked the handle until it came up front, stout as an arm. The bronze medal for the crudest thighs in the country. She lowered her Hottentrot skirt over her fat petwadding, the rill from the town pump, Reverend of Hawthorne. "Water, Mosh," the captain roared, arch-plump and archibullied, oxen-eyed Ursus stuff, with a gait as if he'd broken both legs, but especially the right, and pants so tight one could preserve his whole collection of stable boy jewels.